Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Peter J. Bylsma. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, The Short Bible, a chronological summary of the Old and New Testaments, available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. But if you guys want to gather everything that Peter has to offer, do yourself a favor and head directly to his personal site, shortbible.com. There, not only will you find more information on Peter himself, you'll find more information on this wonderful book, The Short Bible, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's shortbible.com. Guys, and I will say that Peter was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, make sure you're doing yourself a favor and you're contacting ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. So without further ado, I'm going to sit back just like all of you. We're going to sit back, we're going to strap in, and we're going to get ready for a fantastic education because Peter is going to take us back to church. I love it. Peter, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Benji, for having me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours. We're absolutely looking forward to this. I am an avid reader. A lot of my audience members are as well, but also not only avid reader, but always looking to expand my horizons and learn, right? Education is fantastic, and you never cease to become educated. And the moment you do is a scary time. So we're looking to take advantage of this, Peter. Now, I know we have so much information to cover. But before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, Peter.
Yeah, I consider myself a world citizen. I've lived in 7 states and 4 other countries. I've been studying the Bible for about 50 years or so. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Wheaton College in Illinois and a master's and doctorate from the University of Washington in Seattle. I've just finished my 9th career a couple of years ago in the midst of COVID, and I felt like I needed to do something important. I still had a lot of gas in my tank, you might say, but I wasn't sure what to do. So I decided to take the things that I've done in my life. I've done a lot of writing for government, academic reports, and I've been doing writing for 30, 40 years. Have 10 years of experience in Christian ministry, but 35 years in public service. And a lot of that work was done in investigating complex topics, whether it's the environment or finance or whatever, and studying that and then putting the gist of what the issues are and what the solutions are into reports for busy people. And so when I retired, I thought, well, what does the world need now? I still have a lot of energy left, and what am I good at? And I realized that the combination of those things was to write a shorter version of the Bible that could be absorbed, that would be accurate, and read quickly by people all over the world.
What an impressive background, man. Look, we're going to have to invite you back onto the network, not to discuss this book or any other books you write, but really just to discuss your background, because I'm sure you have stories for days with the careers that you've been through, with the traveling that you've done, and we'd love to hear it. That's absolutely incredible, man.
That would be fun. I've got some crazy stories.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, the purpose of today's interview is all about the Short Bible. So without further ado, tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I realized that the Bible is really long. I like to make puzzles, but I don't like them to be more than 500 pieces. Well, the Bible is like a 5,000-piece puzzle, and you don't have the picture on the box to kind of guide you. And so it's really long, it's really complicated, it's not laid out in chronological order, and it's got a lot of words that I don't feel like are necessary. And as a result, people don't read it. And those people who do often don't really understand it. It was written at a different time, a different context, different geography, and we don't really get it. And there's a lot of ignorance about what the stories and the messages are. I have some atheist friends who talked to me about the Bible, and they heard I was writing this, and they said, well, I'll read it, but I'm not going to believe it. And I said, why not? And he said, well, there's stuff in there that about slavery and pedophilia, and I'm not going to believe any book that teaches that. I said, it doesn't teach that. They said, well, it's written in there, so it must teach it. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they've totally misunderstand the messages. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of lack of detail. I mean, there's 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and there's a lot of things that happen during that time, like the Greeks take over, the Romans take over. Nothing in the Bible explains that and how the Old and the New Testament are connected. So what I find is a lot of people read the Bible to justify their own personal beliefs and actions. And I don't think that's the right way to read the Bible. I think the Bible should inform our personal beliefs and actions, not be used as a crutch to justify our own perspectives. Mm-hmm. And so I realized a shorter book is much more likely to be read and understood. And so I decided I'd take a leap and try to condense all this into something that could be read in a way that the normal book would be read today, chronologically, with a beginning and an end, with characters, with plots. So I haven't put it into current day context. There are other books that have done that, but I've really just condensed it, organized it in chronological order, and then filled in the details where they were, when I felt like they were missing, so that the people who were reading it would understand it better.
You know, Peter, next concept that I want to go into is the concept of inspiration. Now, you've already started to touch up on it, so thank you very much. So we know how this particular narrative came about. Obviously, a discussion that you were having with someone else and their lack of understanding or misunderstanding of the Bible led you to embark upon this journey. Now, I want to talk about creative writing for a second. Because as you stated, you have been writing for a number of years. So this is something that has always been a part of you. Now, creative writing, what inspired you to embark upon that journey? Were there artists that inspired you, other writers that inspired you growing up? What inspired you to embark upon this creative journey and become a writer, Peter?
Well, I started out as a journalist while I was still in high school. I took a journalism class and I started covering sports. So I've been writing in a particular way for my entire life. I worked for the government, I worked for Congress, and we did reports for Congress, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, objective truth about different situations. And I learned the craft of collecting evidence and writing concisely for a busy reader. And I know a lot of people they want to read the Bible, but they don't have the time. They've maybe had a New Year's resolution that they're going to read it in a year. And I made that resolution myself. And I never got around to it. I would get bogged down, or some of the books just were boring. And so I never kind of made my way through it. I mean, I think the Bible is the most read book of all time, but a lot of people, it's sitting on their shelf and they really haven't read it, or they've read parts of it. So I wanted to make it short enough so that people could read it in a few days and understand what its messages are. And while you can read it quickly, the material is so profound that I suggest people actually think about it as they're reading it and reflecting on it and how it affects their own life.
Absolutely.
So I've been writing for decades. And this is the first time I've written a book like this. And I wouldn't call it a creative process. I mean, I had to think of the idea. One of the things that surprised me is nobody's ever done this before. And that kind of blows my mind because it is so complicated. So this is the first of its kind. Again,
here in the line with Peter J. Bylsma. We're discussing his fantastic book, The Short Bible, a chronological summary of the Old and New Testaments. Available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, or directly through his personal site, shortbible.com. Peter, next question that I'd love to go into, in addition to your own personal experience within religion and in ministry, what type of research did you do in preparation for this book?
Well, I've been reading hundreds of books about the Bible for, the last 50 years. I went to Wheaton College and we had classes on the Old Testament, the New Testament, Judaism, the literature of the Bible. So that kind of started my research, and I've been studying it and listening to thousands of sermons, and I've kind of absorbed it over the last 50 years. It's probably the only piece of literature that I'm really good at. I'm more of a nonfiction writer, a nonfiction person. I don't have the patience to read through a long book, but this one is one that I've gotten to know very well. Both my parents were in ministry for their entire life, both in the U.S. and around the world. So I've learned so much from them, and being around them, and being at my father. He just passed away, but he was still doing ministry when he was 90 years old, just a few years ago.
Wow.
So I've benefited from great role models, great teachers, great classes, great books. I've got a big library. I've got probably 6 or 7 different versions of the Bible, as well as commentaries, textbooks. I've held on to them all these years, and I use those to help fill in some of the details and realize what's important. When you write a book, you need to have an idea of what the book is about so you can thread all the details together in a cohesive way. But that was the first challenge, was to figure out what is this all about? I asked my dad, who's been in ministry for 60 years, I said, Dad, if you had to say what the Bible is about, what would you say the main points are? And so he spoke for 2 hours, and I took notes. And then I had to consolidate all that into a set of messages that run through the entire book as if you would be following a plot in a regular book.
Peter, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting before you began this journey?
Well, I was surprised that I learned so much about the Bible. I've been studying it for 50 years, but I really didn't have a good grasp of the Old Testament, especially because I'm a Christian and I've focused on the New Testament. But there are characters in the Old Testament that I've never heard of. There's a guy named Jephthah. I didn't learn about him in Sunday school. I never heard of him. And I started reading his story. He's one of the kings among the Israelites. And his story is amazing. He's now one of my favorite characters, but it's very, very tragic. And if I started talking about it, I would probably start crying. But there are people that I didn't know about. I got new insights into the scriptures. I think the book of Job has some new meaning for me because of kind of the depth in which I analyzed it. There's something in my book about Job that I think will be surprising to people. I also felt a lot closer to God. I felt like God was inspiring me to do this, motivating me, and as I was writing it, I kind of had to make decisions about what do I include, what do I not include, does it relate to the broader picture or the themes. So I had to be ruthless in cutting things out. Now there's a lot of things in the Bible that I don't think are all that necessary to understand the main messages. There's genealogies, there's census information, there's a lot of extra words, you might say. Mm-hmm. When I was working for Congress and other government organizations, I was taking all kinds of information and having to boil it down to the important points and organizing it in a way that people would understand quickly. Well, that's what I did with the Bible. I had to cut some things out. If there were 10 examples of a particular point, I might list 2 or 3. And had to pick the best 2 or 3. So in that way, I got it down probably to about 15 to 20% of the total context. So in about 300 pages, I cover the entire Bible. I've got some additional materials at the end, some reference materials and an introduction and a preface that explains why and how I wrote the book. But it's actually a fairly quick read if you wanted to just read it from a literature point of view. I've been amazed at how little a lot of people know about the Bible stories. I was coaching a football team, and I was trying to make an analogy about, the underdog, and I started telling the story about David and Goliath. But I didn't say who they were. I just started telling the story. And then I asked the team, does anybody know who I'm talking about? And 2 or 3 out of the whole team knew that it was a story about David and Goliath. So there's a lot of, I would say, biblical illiteracy in the world, even though the terms and the stories are used in the secular press all the time, whether it's the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son, which I think is really about the prodigal's father. Prodigal means extravagant, and the story is about an extravagant son, but really the story in the context of it was written is about an extravagant father who lavishes love on somebody who totally doesn't deserve it.
I love it. I love it. Peter, listen, man, as we close out of this wonderful interview, because I could stay here and I could talk to you for hours. All right, guys, listen, I could do it. Unfortunately, we're not going to, right? I mean, you know what you have to do. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, ShortBible.com are the places you have to go. There's no getting around it. That's the way to gather all of the information that Peter has comprised. Peter, as we close out, man, we've discussed so much information so far. Is there anything that we haven't yet touched up on that you really want to make sure our listening audience is aware of?
There's going to be an audio version. It's being translated into Spanish. One of the things that I started this project thinking about was, I think this is going to make a lot of money, but I don't want the money. And so what I did was I set up a nonprofit organization that would take 90% of the royalties that I get to channel it into good causes, helping the poor, helping translate the book into other languages that can be spread across the world. So I'm not here to make money. It's not my book. It's God's book. And to the extent that people can get it and read it and understand it and then buy it, that money will then go on to do other good things in the world.
There you have it. There you have it. So a fantastic education while doing something good at the same time. You guys, listen, you know that I usually like to end my interviews with a big spiel offering a reflection. It just doesn't even feel right to do that in this instance. I mean, this stuff was so profound, everything that Peter discussed. You know what you have to do. If you haven't been sold on it yet, pinch yourself. I don't know what's up with you. I don't know what's wrong with you. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Here in the line with Peter J. Bylsma. We just finished discussing his wonderful book, The Short Bible, a chronological summary of the Old and New Testaments, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through his site, shortbible.com. Let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves, and it starts with this fantastic narrative. You surely will not be disappointed. Peter, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Great. Thanks, Benji.